How do you choose who's going to be a really good copywriter for your agency versus someone who's going to be mediocre?
Do you think that following your passion is good advice?
Being able to grow an audience and understanding marketing are two completely different things.
There is no plan B. There is nothing else. Tats.
Hey.
So I wanted to start off today's episode with asking you an interesting question. So, hypothetically, bear with me, if we were to go on a nature expedition, 7 days alone in the wilderness, we have nothing except 10 basic primitive survival tools with us, and we have to make it for 7 days, eating what we catch, fishing, you name it. When you come out of this experience, what do you think would be the biggest takeaway that you could use to immediately apply it to your business to make the biggest gains? And why do you think that?
What experience do you have being in the wild? How are you like, I've never lit a fire kind of guy before? Or are you like, yeah, I've gutted a fish before?
Yeah, I've more the latter. My name is Hunter, and I grew up in like a very small town of like 2,000 people, so we had fires for fun. We lit fires for fun.
Okay. Yeah, cool, same. Biggest lesson, I reckon it would be that nothing that we do on our business or things that happen in our real life don't really matter that much. Like, they're like a bonus on top of everything. Like, because I went on a sailing trip on a tall ship. So I was volunteering. A tall ship is essentially like, if you've watched Pirates of the Caribbean, like a massive wooden ship. And so I was volunteering on this ship because my girlfriend at the time, her mum, did like work for this charity that basically takes kids out on these tall ships. And then we did like a 3-day sail all throughout the night. So it's like sailing in the day, sailing at night. You basically sleep for 5 hours. You work for 5 hours. You sleep for 5 hours. And it's like on, off, on, off, on, off, round the clock. And when you do something like that, all the stresses you face in your day-to-day life are all of a sudden very real. They're like survival based. They're like, are we going the right way or are we getting lost? Are we going to survive? Like, are we going to survive this wind? Will this thing break on the boat or is it in okay condition? And so all you think about is real important stuff which can affect your life. And I feel like the same thing would happen when you're in this survival thing. It's like, oh shit, all of these things which I thought mattered don't matter, because what's ultimately more important than that is, am I fed? Basically, do I have food? Am I going to freeze? Will I be eaten? And those are ultimately like miles more important than, did I pick up a client today? Have I offended this one person? And so I feel like it would just give you clarity that all of these things that we think matter in our day-to-day don't matter at all, which then probably gives you a bit of freedom and just general peace of mind and less stress in your day-to-day activity, to be honest. What about you?
That's a good perspective. I think that it really makes me think of like just how much more grateful we would be for everything that we take for granted. Maybe be more appreciative for the mundaneness that we don't want to go reply to all of these DMs or engage with people on Twitter or write an email today. But like, when you're worried about being eaten at night, I think that puts a lot of things into perspective. And the reason I ask this is because we are going to do this. It might not be super soon, where we can afford to go incommunicado for 7 days, no contact with the outside world. But mark my words, it will happen, and we will report back on our experiences and see, if we got it right or if we thought something totally different. I don't know how soon this will happen, but it's going to happen eventually.
I would love for this to happen, to be fair. I recently was at a friend's stag and went paintballing, and from the moment it started.
Can you explain what stag means for our American viewers? Because I was a bit lost when I heard this at first.
It's a party you have that the groom has before he's married, basically. So all the guys, the stepdads there, not stepbrothers, brother-in-laws, sorry, a normal dad. Well, in this case, it was stepdad. And we went paintballing, and we were so hungover. But as soon as I got there, I just felt in the zone. Like, you just want to sprint up, and like you think about nothing else about other than attacking the other team. It also makes me think how terrifying it'd be if they were real bullets, because it literally just comes out of the blue. But anyway, coming on from that, I read a book called The Miracle in the Andes, which is about the Uruguayan rugby team that flew, and they crashed in the middle of the Andes and had to survive for 72 days, I believe, before they did literally the hardest hike. One of the hardest hikes that you can do, and that it would take like teams of climbers, months of planning, and the highest grade equipment. And they did it in rugby boots, using the seats of the plane as snow boots, wearing a bunch of jeans and some sweatshirts. And in one of the scenes, they crash, a load of people dying, a load of people are crushed and injured and slowly dying. One woman got crushed in the seats, and she's just like broken up screaming, but they can't get her out basically. So she just eventually slowly dies. And the main guy, of the guy who wrote this book, he smashed his head, so he was concussed for a few days. They thought he was dead. So they sort of just threw him out by the edge of the fuselage, and they were all covering inside, which probably is what allowed him to survive, because his brain froze. The actual brain, the cold froze his brain a bit, so that he didn't actually get too inflamed and get too much brain damage. And then one of his friends was like, I think he might actually still be alive, so brought him in. He wakes up and they're like, man, the plane crashed basically. And these guys have never seen snow before, most of them, because they're from Uruguay. And they're all of a sudden like minus 40 degrees Celsius Andes, huddling together, trying to stay warm. And in one of the scenes, all they had to eat was like a few bars of chocolate. And so after like a week of rationing the chocolate, he's got like a chocolate-covered peanut left over from this bar of chocolate. And he like nibbles the chocolate around the edge and then puts the peanut back in his pocket. Eats nothing for the rest of the day, goes to sleep. Wakes up the next day, pulls out the peanut, breaks it in half, eats half the peanut, puts the other half in his pocket, eats nothing for the rest of the day. They don't even have water at this point, so they're just drinking water from the snow, which like chaps your lips and like fucks you up basically. And then the next day after that, eats the other half of the peanut. That's all he eats for the rest of the day. And then for the next 5 days or potentially a week, they just eat nothing pretty much, until at one point they're like, okay, we're gonna have to, I think he was like, I'm gonna eat the pilot who died in the pilot seat. And they were like, and so they just had to start eating the raw humans to survive, basically. 2 months of this, of eating little nibbles of humans and malnutrition, is when they do this huge hike over the mountains. And anyway, they a bunch of them end up surviving because 2 of them make the hike and get rescues. And what's amazing is most of them were just completely fine mentally afterwards. Like, they all realized how short life is and how fast it goes by, and the importance of literally treasuring every moment. And so the only thing that drove him as he was going over the mountains was the love for his father, because his mother and his sister died in the crash. So he was like, I need to go find my dad to tell him that I'm alive, basically, and to basically help him, because he was like, he's going to be in a mess. And afterwards, he ended up becoming a race car driver. He went through a period of like shagging a load of hot models, because like for the first time in their life, like women just seemed fascinated by him, and settled down with some supermodel who he'd like sort of hooked up with ages ago, and then just chilled out. And one day there was a business conference, and the guy messaged him, was like, I want you to do a talk at my conference. And the guy was like, nah, no way, like no one would be interested in this. And he's like, please come to my conference. Still said no. I think eventually he actually turned up at his house or something. He was like, I need you to come. So finally he gives in. He's got a few notes prepared, gets up there. Absolute classic. He just forgets his notes in the end. It's like, I'm just going to tell the story. So he tells the story of how it happened. And then at the end of it, it was just everyone's roaring, like standing ovation, applause. And so then he goes on and like starts a career like public speaking, basically, and then writes this book. So yeah, that's probably a more extreme version of our little fishing trip. in the middle of nowhere. But I feel like you would get like it teaches you similar things just in a much softer way.
In a much softer way, for sure. I think, yeah, we're not facing like imminent danger of we cannot contact anybody. Like, we need to do this to survive. I think there's like I feel like there's got to be some. I mean, obviously, I wouldn't know because I've never been in these situations. Just, I feel like there's like a mental flip that would just happen. Like, when you know that there is no plan B, like, there is nothing else. Yeah, well, we will do that and report back on our experiences whenever it is that we get out to the wilderness for 7 days and can afford to just disappear. But yeah, I also, what were you about to say?
Actually, go for it. I was gonna say, when are you getting out of Canada? No, not Canada. I always forget where you live.
The U.S.,
Minnesota.
the Midwest.
The Midwest.
Yeah.
When are you getting out the Midwest and beginning your, I don't know, digital nomad lifestyle, whatever thing? And what is your opinion on, like, where would you want to live? And what is your opinion on sort of this nomading stuff, which is obviously very popular now and I've done a bit of, versus in-person office, having what being in the city? Yeah, like, tell me a little about how you're thinking about that or what your plans are.
So that's interesting. I think that as far as like my plans to start going month to month, I think it would be the easiest for me, just given the nature of my work, to when I have like a client fulfillment manager or person that handles a lot of delivery for clients. Because I like doing a lot of like the marketing and sales stuff, the content, YouTube, Twitter, like all those sort of things. And I like the creative strategy behind a lot of the system designs and different solutions, things like that, AI stuff. It's more as like the mundane, like delivering, implementing, training teams. Like I'd want a team around in place of to do that. Because sometimes, like, if I'm onboarding a client and it's the first 2 weeks and they're first, starting to use the workspace, there's going to be a lot of questions. There's inevitably going to be some bug for somebody for something, because that's just how it goes. And you want to be able to handle those things and make sure everybody's up to speed as quickly as possible. And, with traveling, different time zones, flights, just no internet connection at times, I'd want, in order for me to feel like I could really enjoy myself and like be at a good peace of mind, knowing that everything's being handled, not be super stressed all the time, I'd want to hire somebody to really manage client fulfillment for me. When it comes to like in-person work versus, the digital remote life that we are now living, I never wanted to have a physical office, physical location or place. I mean, I even tell my assistant that, like, I don't care. Like, he asked me when I first started working for me, like, is there any times you specifically want me to be up to, coordinate with you on something, or if you need me to be awake while you're working for whatever reason, because he's in a different time zone than me. And I thought it was an interesting question. But I was like, no, like, I prefer to do all of my work asynchronously. I think meetings, for the most part, are a waste of time. You actually, when you have to write something down, you have to connect your thoughts together. Where sometimes when you're in a meeting, you can be really unproductive. And if it's for networking, like, I totally understand. But when it comes down to being productive, I don't think meetings are always the greatest thing to do. So when it comes to like an office work, I mean, I think that's where obviously I make most of my money, is because things have moved out of offices. People are now remote, and they're wondering, how can we connect our teams the most effective way? Well, we can't just go over to their cubicle and ask, like, hey, how far did you get on this project? Yeah, I think it's been a big opportunity for me, at least. And I know that there was when it first happened, everybody shifted away from the offices and we're like, we all want to work remote. And now companies are like, no, come back. Like, we want you in our offices. But I think now that it's established that it's possible to work remote, especially even hybrid, I think people are seeing a lot of value in just having a centralized workspace, even if you are in person, because yeah, I think hybrid work will be the biggest, at least in the near future. I think a lot of people like the idea of being able to be anywhere and work. But I know some people feel differently. I don't know. Have you thought about like, because I know you're working with a startup now. Have you thought about like, having an office space, having a team that you're going to see every morning? Like, does that lifestyle sound appealing to you, or are you more a fan of the digital nomadic? I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so I've done both. I was in an office before all this started, and I think it is often more productive to have an office. I think hybrid is probably a good middle ground,
Mm-hmm.
but I think it also a big part depends on how you like to work and the person. Because I think a lot of people, if they're just at home, will do nothing or very little work or the minimum. This is when you're in work, you're probably likely to do a little bit more because it's change of environment, especially if you're just doing it at home. Like even I notice if I don't go out to a cafe or go to a separate space to work, I'm just less productive. So I think you also, when you're all in person, there's a certain chemistry when it comes to bouncing ideas. You can iterate faster. Like I even noticed like when I was working with Dylan and Glenn a lot more, we would regularly meet up in person, just book out a place for a few days to get some big stuff down together, because there's just a slightly different vibe when you're all there in person. But I think for me right now, yeah, working remote makes more sense because the counter is I do work quite well when I'm just on my doing my own thing basically, and I prefer the freedom of just not having to be focused somewhere. But I think later down the line, essentially maybe in a few years, I could see myself or something wanting or being open to some sort of hybrid thing. Like I don't know whether that's if I have a bigger business, whether that has a base, or whether I decide to do some. To be fair, I literally don't know how it would work. I think what the middle ground that I would like is I want an entrepreneur hub where I can live with, say, 5 to 50 other entrepreneurs in sort of like a resort place where you can play pool together, play football, go swimming, go to the beach. And there's also a library. There's a place you can do work like that. I think that's probably, the dream for me, or what would be most successful. Because one issue I've had a little bit traveling is some people don't enjoy their work as much as you do. And they're literally just doing, say, customer support whilst living abroad, rather than they love their work, they're building a business, they're doing this. And I've met a few people who are doing that side of thing, which is cool. And I think I'm going to try and get a place to them next time I go out in September. But I think that makes big difference. So I think that's probably my middle ground and how I see it, to be honest.
I would love to have like a hub. You think about it like you're gonna go out to Bali for a couple weeks or a month, and then come back to the hub. Like, it sounds like I should be in an Iron Man suit flying back and forth, but I'll be later.
So you have a gym, you have your gym there, you work out together, you can play some, smash out a load of work, pool table, maybe have a game of footy in the evening, go out somewhere nice for dinner, smash workout together, brainstorm ideas. Like, I think it would be awesome. Because I think with a lot of the business stuff, especially kind of more service-based things, there's huge overlap for skills and like in useful ideas that anyone can implement and use. Like in the same way, like although it's not really service-based, but Hampton, like it's so successful because they're pre-vetting a load of entrepreneurs doing, I think, a minimum of 1 million a year or have had a decently sized exit. And then it's just like you put them in groups and little support groups to chat and talk to someone and bounce ideas. And it would basically be that, but you're living there basically. And obviously you need your own time and space so you can go off and do your own thing as well. But yeah, I think that'd be really cool.
Yeah, definitely. I like Hampton too. Didn't Sam Parr start that?
Yeah, recently. It looks awesome, to be fair.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, okay, so like obviously we can't compete with the My First Million guys. They're in a different realm of entrepreneurship than we are. But that doesn't mean that we have no value to provide, obviously, or we wouldn't be sitting here talking about this. Um, so when you are first, dreading your 9 to 5 and you want to make your own money, you want to be your own boss, do you think that following your passion is good advice, and why?
No.
I agree, but go on.
It can be a good idea. But this is actually a massive waking point to me because I had the classic like young life crisis where I was like, what am I meant to be doing? What's my purpose? I read like novels. I think in novel books, he talked about your specific knowledge. It's like, there's this one thing that you are going to be better at than everyone else. And instantly into that, I was like, oh my God, what is my specific knowledge? I was like texting my mum. I was like, Mum, if I was going to start a business, like what business would it be? And I would message my friends like, what skills or values do you think I have? And they're all like, and this is whilst I was dog sitting in Portugal. And so they were messaging like, mate, are you okay? Like, what is going on? And I'm like, please just let me know, like, what are my values? What do you think I'm good at that no one else is good at? And all this sort of shit. And when things really clicked for me is when I read So Good They Can't Ignore You. And he basically says like job satisfaction or like with the work you do often comes down to your ability to choose the job, your ability to have autonomy, choose who you work with, how much you get paid, all this sort of thing. And he was like, to get to those positions, you need to be an extremely valuable human. And so he's like, instead of just focusing on passions, focus on getting really good and everything will follow. And with a lot of things like copywriting or web design or anything like that, no one really enjoys them that much at the start because you're shit at it. It's only as you get better that you can start to enjoy it more because you can see the results that it gets people, all this sort of thing. And so then I was like, oh, so all I have to do is just make sure I'm constantly becoming more valuable, constantly learning more and increasing my skill set. And as long as I do that, I will be okay. And so that I kind of switched to that mindset probably like maybe 2 years ago. And probably one of the best little mindset switches I've ever had, because then it would just stop worrying about what my passion was. Like when I figure out, the thing is, if you stack up your skill set, once you figure out what your passion is, the chances are you're going to be more able to execute on that or do something with that because of all the skills than if you literally know how to do nothing. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, my passion is going to be to start like a surf instructor business. Well, you got to learn marketing, you need copywriting, team management, all of this sort of stuff. If you've been doing nothing up until the moment that you decide that, you're at a huge disadvantage compared to if you'd spent the last 6 years getting as good as you can in XYZ skill set and then executing on whatever your passion or idea is.
A good answer. I agree with most of what you said. Specifically in the part where you said like that we're not good at it at first. What is that?
I want to know what you disagree with.
I mean, I think generally like it's not even really the okay, yeah. We're gonna do that bare knuckles, you and me. It's gonna be in the wilderness too on our expedition, so like nobody's around, it's just gonna be me and you.
Bare knuckle boxing.
Bare knuckle boxing. Yes, exactly. Maybe a bear will join in. It'll be awesome. Okay, it's not that I really disagree with you. It's more that I just had something else to add to it before you go all fight me on me. I do, yeah, okay. I agree with like, it's not good advice because you're not going to be good at it at first. And like our brains, we naturally don't want to do things that we're not good at because they feel like, ultimately, it feels like people are going to judge us and then we're going to die alone. Like, if you really think about it, normally things go back to like afraid of dying. Besides the point, if you were to say, somebody brand new, go follow your passion. A passion still needs to make money. If people aren't paying you for your passion. It's just a hobby. And I don't think, like, I think people think a lot of people's who have businesses, their passions, they mistake them for hobbies when they're like following their passion. Because like, it's not like I woke up one day and I was like, wow, I am really passionate about writing tweets and emails. No, like, I initially started a newsletter. Wasn't very good at it, and I wrote daily emails for it. And after time, I liked it more and more because I got good at it. And not even that I was good relative to like producing, the best high quality content. It was more like I felt good with the process and knowing what I had to do each and every day in order to, grow incrementally. I think that it's bad advice because I think the better advice would be to say, what are your natural abilities? What are your natural talents? What do you find that yourself that you're naturally more capable of doing versus other people? And for me, that was more like systems thinking. And that's why I, gravitated to workspaces and operations and things like that. But I wasn't good at Notion at first. I was really frustrated for a long time because I couldn't figure things out. It's not like I found it and was immediately like, this is the passion of my life. So I think it's more about leaning into what you're naturally good at and you're naturally talented in. And when you combine that with skills that, revolve around that, and eventually you get good at them, that's where you can become passionate. I think we get passionate about things that afford us good lifestyles. I don't think you'd be so passionate about your business if you didn't get to travel and wake up whenever you wanted to. But yeah, ultimately you just need to be comfortable with failing, not even thinking of as failing, because when you start something new, you're going to be bad. You're going to suck at it, but that's just okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
The little Goggins came out again. I was waiting for him.
I know, I saw you.
Goggins. I agree. The only thing I would add to that is, sometimes you don't know what you're naturally good at.
Sure.
And that's
hard. I'm not saying this is an easy process by any means.
I do copywriting now. Well, it's a big part of what I do in my day-to-day. I was never good at writing. I was never interested in writing. I hated writing in school. I purposefully did math, physics, chemistry, and biology for A levels to avoid writing, then did engineering. Like, everything I did was to avoid writing. I read a lot when I was younger, but that was it. And it was only by getting a job where I happened to do some writing in it that I was like, oh, this is actually quite fun. So I think the other thing is also, if you don't know what you're good at, it's just trying things, throwing stuff at the wall and ultimately seeing what sticks, pretty much. I want to share on this topic. I had a call. I bought a consulting call with a guy who owns a very successful agency who works with coaches and consultants and does kind of front end and back end marketing. So mostly email marketing, but also a bit of content on the side, going into does some YouTube as well, basically.
How do you question?
He just helps. Yeah, go for it.
How do you define the difference between front and back end marketing? Is back end more like once they're in the email list, like the funnels and things they're going through, like not before they've converted, given you your information? Because I just think that's an interesting distinction.
Yeah, so it's like the same with front end and back end of like a website, I guess. Like the front end is what everyone sees first.
So what they see first. Example, interesting. Okay. It makes a little bit more sense in that context.
Yeah. So like for most coaches and consultants, if you've got a social media account, it would be a tweet, for example. Mm-hmm. Anything Twitter, all of the content is like, it's like the top of the funnel. It's the front end. Once you then go into the back, which is the funnels, emails, back end offers, high ticket offers, that's when you get into the back end, basically. Which is usually what is pretty underdeveloped for most people. They start with the front and then they leave the back. So I bought a consulting call with him just because I wanted to see how he transitioned from more freelancing, which is kind of where I'm at the moment, doing just a lot of stuff for a lot of people, to shifting more into an agency where he's just got a few copywriters under him. Anime only works like a few hours a day, basically. Only needs to work like 2 hours a day to have a very successful agency. And one of my big takeaways from him is you obviously, so many people try and start an agency and so many people fail. And so I was kind of like, what do you do differently? And how also do you go about hiring? Like, how do you choose who's going to be a really good copywriter for your agency versus someone who's going to be mediocre? And he had a few points which I think would be useful to anyone. So first thing is you'd give a sample out for someone to write, and he'd give them a deadline. And from there, he would just see how quickly they get it back, basically. So whether they get it back a few days before the deadline, whether they get it just on the deadline, or whether they're late. If they're late, completely out. If they're on time, it's also fine. If they're before, then extra thumbs up, because freelancers, copywriters, marketing agencies are notorious for delivering work late. You say it's going to be in with this bit and it's not. The other thing, obviously classic, just hop on a call and see if they're human, basically. After that, he will give him some more work to do. And when he looks at the samples and the works that he gives them to do, he's not really looking for like just how good the copy is. He's looking for what angles people go in with. Mm-hmm. So are they going in with the generic angles which everyone else tries to go in? Which just means they're only ever really going to be an average copywriter. Or do they find some sort of more unique angle which is a bit different, but ties in cleverly to what the offer is? And if they go with that unique angle, chances are they've got the potential, because they've got a slightly different way of thinking, and they've got the potential to be a better copywriter. So we'll focus on those. And then, so tying that into then just anyone who's like a freelancer or has an agency, he was like, the 3 most important things. 1, be super communicative. So always be staying in touch. Don't like ghost people. Show that you care, basically. 2, submit work early. Most people are used to, when they work with a freelancer or an agency, to having work submitted late. If you can submit it like a little bit before the time you do, massive brownie points. It shows that you're just on top of things, basically. And I'm not including deliver, because that's obviously a no-brainer, but I will touch on that a little bit afterwards. And then 3 was like, give them ideas. He was like, just because, say if you've been brought in to do email marketing, or say you've been brought in just to do their Notion backend, he was like, that is only a tiny part of the business and will only do so much. If they've got awful hiring and they've got a terrible team, it doesn't matter how good their Notion operating system is. It's not really going to improve the business. In the same way, if they've got a terrible front end, so if their social media is really bad, or they've got no extra new leads coming into the newsletter, no matter how good your email marketing is, you're only going to make them so much money before it just flatlines, because you can't just keep making money from those same leads without having some extra lead flow as well. So almost either do the front end for them as well, or almost act as a consultant and be like, hey, why don't you do this? And he said, if you do these three things, clients will always love you. And then if you tie this in to actually delivering real results, and so over delivering, getting it, like basically doing a really good job, he was like, almost most of his clients now purely just come from basically referrals, because people are like, oh, this guy's actually good, I feel okay, referring other people who I know need this to them, which I think is really, really rare, because I speak to so many people who've worked with agencies who are just burned. They got like the classic social media marketing or something, and the guys just didn't deliver and basically just burned through their money. And even for me, like I haven't sent cold DM in ages, and I've just kind of been getting like random bits of work and stuff for people who've just heard around, or like, oh, I heard you're quite good at this, blah, blah, or so-and-so just pointed me towards you. And so yeah, I think it points to do those 3 things, deliver, and you really, although you might think it's saturated, it's not really that saturated, because most people are so terrible, not just at delivering, but even at just like being human, being caring. And if you do care, you will stand out so much. So yeah, made me feel pretty solid. It made me excited for future as well, because I think if you focus on those things in the same way as like focusing on just becoming a more valuable human, like I mentioned before, it does seem like it's hard to fail, really.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point with I mean, I keep thinking about how you said like if it doesn't matter how much email marketing you do, if they're not bringing in more lead flow, then it doesn't really matter. So I think that's really interesting. And when you think about the types of offers there are, the types of services, what I do, what you do, because, you know, if the, yeah, that's for the same reason I like to think about things very holistically, and why I like to take on like the fractional COO role, because it allows me to like look into their entire business. And I know that if, you know, are their employees capable of managing things? Like, because if they're not, then it's not like I'm going to take any stress away from the COO or the CEO, because even if I have a great workspace and they really don't need anything from him, if they're just not great employees, they're not proactive, they can't think for themselves, then it doesn't matter. You're still going to have stress because they're not going to be able to figure it out. And so that's why I was just talking with a fractional CMO agency where they basically go into a company and just handle all of it, front and back end marketing. And they said they do that for the same reason, because like, they could just run ads or something, but if, the funnel after they convert is in a top tier, then it doesn't matter how many ads they run. It's not going to convert them on the back end. It's going to be useless. They're not going to get them results. They're going to think that the agency isn't doing anything, for that same reason, where you need to take over the whole thing, the front and back end. I just think, yeah, especially people coming up, like creators or smaller size entrepreneurs, freelancers, they don't think enough about the back end of things. It's always the front end, because we're always trying to get clients, trying to make money. But the back end is what's going to allow you to grow so much more quickly and effortlessly than it is on the front end. The front end kind of just keeps the snowball rolling down the hill once you've gotten it. And the back end is what makes you money. I mean, I know you've seen it from email lists. You do that, much more than I do. And I've seen success from email lists, which I think is great considering we come from such different worlds.
Ass over tits, basically.
What?
Ass over tits.
Oh.
You were boob guy.
I see what you did there. I was like, how is it answering my question? But I get it, back end over front end. Very good, Tats. Very funny.
Yeah, if you want both. All right, accountability question, because last week, you said you were going to do a YouTube video by the time we hopped on this call. So I'm bringing you up to be accountable.
Oh.
Have you done that?
I have not. And I'll tell you why. I mean, anything I say is going to be an excuse, obviously. Yeah, I mean, obviously anything I say is going to be an excuse because I haven't done it. But I just had... Yeah. I was doing a lot of recording for my assistant for like on the onboarding because he's been doing a lot of outreach for me. And so now, that cycle has started with like the follow-ups. We're getting people on calls. I had some calls this week with those people, and then I'm doing, a proposal. I'm onboarding like a smaller retainer client. And so when I was onboarding him, I just kind of recorded like that entire process of what it's like setting up contracts and invoices and the client dashboard and the client portals and just all of that, which I think is pretty high leveraged. So I'm not super upset about not getting YouTube video out, because in this way, when I get a new client, my assistant can just take care of all of it. I don't have to do any of those things anymore because I have that documentation for him recorded and now put it into an SOP. But yes, I appreciate you keeping me accountable for that, because I think about it like it's not that I'm not going to do it. It's just that, yeah, this week had some different leverage tasks.
Yeah, it's fair enough. If I came to you with a script
and
I said, here's your outline for the video, or like a rough idea, the CTA, I just need you to record it like you're doing right now. And then I'll also get it edited, put a thumbnail on it, title, and upload it for you. or even like send it to your beta upload, how much would you? Is that something you would pay for, and how much would you pay for it?
See, I've had like a lot of YouTube agencies reach out to me for doing something like this. And it's not that I wouldn't pay for it right now. It's just that the type of content is different. Like you can't really write me a script because I'm going to be building some custom template that is, you can't go from the script first, which is interesting. Because I used to do YouTube videos like video essays, like on financial topics when I have my finance newsletter as a means of like lead gen. But in there you start script first, right? But when it comes to my type of videos, you start from the template first. What am I doing? Or concept first. If I want to talk through some AI, maybe then I could do something script related. But a lot of it's based on the feedback I'm getting immediately from the AI. So it's more conceptual first. If I wanted to do like a video on, here's top 5 prompt engineering tips. I don't think I would do something that generic, but you know what I mean.
Okay, that's fair enough and makes more sense. But it also means that you could realistically get a video done within 1 hour.
Yeah. I mean, I'm gonna be training my assistant to do all the back end for me.
All you would have to do is get it uploaded, because chances are with that kind of video, you probably wouldn't need to edit it at all.
Mm-hmm.
You just need to record your hook before you start, and have an idea of what you're going to say.
Yeah, it's not super editing heavy. Like
re-hook times during the video, depending on how long it is. Maybe get your VA to just clear up any little ums and ahs and stuff.
Yeah.
And then you'd be done. But your input, it would literally be an hour max. So unless you're so busy that you don't have an hour over the next week.
It's not necessarily an hour though, because like maybe the recording process entirety would take an hour, but it depends on the video that I'm doing, really. There are some video types that could easily just take me an hour, right? And maybe that's what I need to do at first, to like just do a simpler concept and not do something that I feel like I need to provide so much value in this that I need to build something super complicated where I should just take who did this? Is it Sean? Sean Peary talks about like anything that you did 2 years ago that you didn't know how to do 2 years ago that you know how to do now. Like I should do things more of that nature, because like, I don't know, let's say I wanted to make what?
3 months ago, 6 months.
Yeah.
6 months ago.
Yeah, even 6 months ago. It's more like if I wanted to make a video about building a second brain, I would need to first build the second brain so I know what I'm going to be doing in the video, because I could just wing it and make it up as I go. But typically I've done that before, but typically that leads to like a more stressed out, not as productive recording session when I'm trying to just make it up as I'm trying to talk at the same time as building it. So yeah. And maybe I'm just justifying like why I haven't done it yet, but it is a little bit more of an involved process than a typical YouTube video, I guess you could say. But at the same time, it's a lot easier because it's more value dense in the sense that it's more technically valuable. Like when I'm building something, someone's going to follow along, or a prompting style that someone's just going to copy and paste. It's more technical. But yeah, and that's what I'm going to have to do with my first YouTube video. And maybe that's why I'm procrastinating a little bit, because I'm going to need to record all the documentation and be like, once I record it, this is what you're going to do. This is how you're going to edit it. These are the types of thumbnails you can do. This is the process for looking for types of thumbnails. Writing a description, coming up with tags. But once that's all done, then from there, probably 2 hours max a week it would cost me, and the ROI on that would be just huge.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. We'll let you go free on that.
I normally I would beat myself up more about it, because like, I don't know, I think like every entrepreneur does at some point. They're just constantly like, oh, I need more hours in the day, or I wish I could have gotten this, or I wish. But since it's like documentation, about a process that I'm no longer going to have to do, that sits all right with me.
Yeah, calm.
I never understand that. Why do you say calm?
Oh, I actually hate the slang. So
Is it new? I have never heard it before until you started saying it. But I was like, is it like chill? Is it cool? Is it like all right?
Yeah. So I used to hate it because I went to Bristol University from Wales, and a load of my new friends that I made when I was at the university were all from London, and they would all be like, "Oh yeah, calm, calm," which is basically like sound or like, "Yeah, that's cool," and I was like, "Oh, that is horrible. It makes my skin crawl every time you say it." And that's a classic. I have now ended up saying it myself, where it's like, "Oh yeah, calm." It's horrible to be honest, but yeah, it's calm.
It's calm. Cool.
Yeah, do you want to wrap up on a final note? And if you don't have anything to, I will.
I want you to go ahead. I want to hear what you have to say.
Okay, so I recently got into sort of like a three-way split rev share deal with two guys who, one was like a growth hacker, marketer sort of guy. The other has had like two massive tech exits, one to PetSmart, and the other one had like 100 million users, basically. It was a dating app. So really, really cool guys. And they are slowly building a community of creators with anywhere up to like 7 million followers, basically, on Instagram and TikTok and this sort of thing. And was meant to start working with one of them, which had like 5 million followers. And another one had a few million followers too, I think. Both of them were set to work. And both of them just absolutely clueless. Just don't know how to do anything related to marketing or making money. And it really just highlighted most people who've got a large audience just don't know what to do with it. Like being able to grow an audience and understanding marketing are two completely different things. Completely different. Just getting initial attention is very different to converting that attention into cash, into offers. Like a lot of creators now, even just you creating funny skits or reels, how are you going to make necessarily money with that, bar maybe a physical product, but you can't really launch a course really? Like it's just tricky. So the big lesson was you don't need a big audience to make a lot of money. Like I crossed 6 figures before I crossed 10,000 followers. I'm pretty sure that is correct. Obviously I partnered up with two guys, which nuances a little bit, but the TLDR was making money before that as well. And you don't need it. Like even now you're seeing there's a whole wave of small creators who are very good at monetizing their audience. So they don't need a huge following. And if you're able to do that, it's almost like being trained on Arrakis. So if you haven't watched Dune, Arrakis is like it's like a desert planet where there's a massive shortage of water. You have these like massive worms that like just eat shit and destroy things in the desert. And there's a people who live in the desert and called the Fremen. And the Fremen are a lot smaller than some of like the other species, like the warrior species. But anyway, when shit ends up hitting the fan and they fight, the Fremen are just ridiculously good at fighting because they're brought up in such tough conditions where they have so little water, have to fight against everyone basically because everyone wants to kill them essentially. And they just end up tougher than everyone and being ridiculously good at fighting. And I think the same is the case if you have a small audience. Like if you can make good money with a small audience, you will be able to help anyone else with a slightly larger audience because the chances are they're absolutely clueless. So if you look at a large creator, do not assume that they're good at marketing. If anything, assume the opposite. And there's something that you can probably do to help them. And that is my final point for this call.
Great point. Always reminds me of I have no idea what her name is because I don't keep up with things, but the influencer who had like millions of followers and sold like $19 worth of t-shirts. I know you know what I'm talking about.
I have absolutely no idea what you're on about.
Okay, well, I wish I could remember their name, but oh man, I wish I could. But point is, millions of followers, launched a t-shirt, like merch, made like maybe $100. So yeah, just adds to what you're saying. Like if you can't make $1,000 with 1,000 followers, then good luck with 10,000.
Yes. Righto. That's the pod.
Righto. Subscribe, leave a comment, rate 5 stars. share, friends, family, uncle, goldfish. Yeah, awesome.
Nice.
See you next week.
See you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yo, it's time to build leverage, stack up your advantage. Life and business time to manage, never stay stranded. Start with the vision, mission, plan of attack. Keep your eyes on the prize, no looking back.